All right. Today we're going to look at testosterone doses and cycles for bodybuilding size. Before I dig into this, this is not a prescription, not a recommendation, not an endorsement for PED use. This is about harm reduction. I know people are going to do this stuff regardless. There's not much you can say or do to dissuade somebody who's intent on doing it. Always the safest thing to do is not use drugs at all, or work with a medical doctor and get a prescription and make sure it's managed by a medical doctor. Be smart about things. But, I also don't want to hide from information. I think too many people in the past have lied about what really happens, and you know, part of harm reduction is understand what people use and what's out there. So people don't do stupid shit or avoid doing stupid shit that other people have done. Um, Before we get into it, please take the time to like, subscribe, and comment. If you like my videos, I really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. I get a lot of people watching my videos, but not a lot subscribing. It helps with the YouTube gods. Anyway, so let's dig into this. Considerations for a test hypertrophy cycle. So first of all, a lot of the stuff I covered in my testosterone profile video, but I kind of want to rehash it. So make sure we understand what testosterone is, how it works. So these are just some of the basics. So testosterone is the parent male hormone. It is the master male hormone. It is the hormone that all other steroids are derived from. All right, so just remember that. Every other anabolic androgenic steroid is a derivative of test in some form or fashion. Or it can be derived. Uh, I consider, some may disagree, but I consider testosterone to be essential for male health and well-being. You need some level of testosterone in your body if you don't want to feel like shit. Um, you know, my experience is that you feel the best when you run a test base. It's what most people do. It's not saying you have to. You don't have to. Um, if you don't like having a sex drive, if you don't like having erections, and do you? I'm just saying, there are consequences when you don't run a test base. Maybe with the only exception being Anavar, it doesn't seem to shut you down. You can still keep your natural test running while taking Anavar to a certain degree. Um, Also consider that test converts to other hormones when building your cycles. It's a pro-hormone of sorts. Test converts into estrogen. On 20% on average is the rate that it aromatizes through to estrogen through the aromatase enzyme. Also have a video up about that if you want to understand what the aromatase enzyme is. So keep in mind when you're building your cycle, if your body fat is really high, you probably don't want to run a high dose of testosterone because more of it is going to convert to estrogen as aromatase is made in the fat cells in the male body primarily. Okay, so the fatter you are, the more you're going to aromatize test into estrogen, and it's just this self-defeating loop where you just get fatter and fatter, and you'll see it in the gym. You'll see the dudes that are loaded up on testosterone that just keep getting fatter and fatter, and they don't look better. You know who I'm talking about. So if you are a high body fat percentage, you may want to consider running lower dose of test in something that doesn't aromatize. Test also converts to DHT, dihydrotestosterone, 10% on average conversion rate through the 5-AR enzyme. It varies from different people. Some people convert more heavily. Also, if you are super sensitive to DHT symptoms, you may want to consider running lower doses of tests. Symptoms would be benign prostate hyperplasia, where your prostate gets swollen up, hair loss, masculinization, things like that. If you want to avoid those side effects, you may want to run um, a lower dose of test. You can use a 5-AR inhibitor, but My experience with 5-AR inhibitors is that they cause erectile dysfunction at almost everybody that uses them. Just been my experience. When you get super high doses, the test flu, I think you got to consider that too. There's a certain dose that you reach where it just makes you sick. Base dose calculations for men. By no means this is the gospel. This is just kind of a rule of thumb. Um, at least what I have seen in the bodybuilding community. Um, Also keep in mind when you're 150 pounds and just starting out, you don't need to run the dose that a 300-pound mass monster Big Ramy is running. It's not going to help you. You're not going to get any bigger. It's just not going to work. You got to keep in mind the bigger you are, the more androgen receptors you have, and the more you know the more you need. It's just that simple. So it's just like any other medicine. The bigger you are, the bigger the dose. And the more advanced you are, the more you need to maintain what you have. So always get the least or the most out of the least amount possible. When you're starting out, just a very little bit's going to make a huge difference. You don't need much. Only increase doses if you hit a roadblock. I will tell you that more bigger bigger doses arbitrarily just lead to more side effects. They don't really lead to much more growth. I've tried it both ways, and I'm telling you, huge amounts just make you sick, and when you're sick, you can't grow. It really is that simple. So what I have seen for cruise doses, TRT, somewhere in the you know one 1 milligram per pound of body weight range. So, for example, if you're a 200-pound male, 200 milligrams is more than enough for a cruise dose or TRT. You're bigger, you're going to need a little bit more. A beginner blast, size blast, less than 2 years of lifting, maybe your first, second, third cycle, somewhere around 2 milligrams per pound of body weight. So if you're a 200-pound bodybuilder, in the 400 milligram range per week is probably going to get you good results. Intermediates 3.5, advanced, which is like when I'm talking about advanced, I'm talking about you're knocking on the door to get your pro card or you already have your pro card. So 200-pound bodybuilders can use up to 1,000 milligrams per week. Now, keep in mind that's not saying you have to use that much. Always use the least possible. That's just typically what I see. Like I've talked to quite a few coaches and quite a few pro bodybuilders. Most pro bodybuilders are running somewhere between 750 milligrams to 1.25 grams per week. That's just what I've seen. Some less, some more, depending on who they are. The smart guys are running less. They last longer. It's like I've heard that Dexter Jackson never ran much and got bodybuilding until he was 50. Constructing stacks. So test is the base, and test works well as the base of a stack with another anabolic on top of it. So you can run cycles without test. You don't need test. As I mentioned earlier, you're just not going to have any sex drive, and you might risk erectile dysfunction. You don't need a big dose. You can run a really small dose of test. As I mentioned, you can run just a TRT dose and stack an anabolic on top of it, something like equipoise or nandrolone or primobolan, and you don't need a huge dose of test. Size building. Test in one anabolic is probably the best thing. You don't need 50 different steroids. You don't need DHB, you don't need tren, you don't need all of these exotic hormones to get big. Just do the basics. I promise you, I talked to quite a few people that are pros. I talk to coaches that coach pros. They don't run the crazy shit that all your gym bros do. They just don't. They just don't. You're not going to last a long time if you're running fucking tren year round. I promise you. or if you're running mint year round, you're just not going to last. You're not going to last long enough to get as big as a pro bodybuilder. It is a long game. You have to do stuff that's sustainable over a long period of time and remain healthy enough to get that big. If you're redlining your engine all the time, you're never going to make it to that size. So testing one anabolic. Choose an anabolic that agrees with your body. So don't force it. This is something that a lot of people are guilty of. I've been guilty of in the past. You really like the way something makes you look, but it gives you all kinds of shitty side effects. If it gives you shitty side effects and you have to take more drugs to manage those side effects, it's not productive. Um, Take the stuff that gives you the least amount of side effects and you can take in the largest dose without side effects. Personally, I like things like Test. I mean, Test and Primo would be my favorite if you can find real Primo Primobolan and afford it. Primo doesn't have a lot of side effects. Test by itself, to be honest with you, if you're moderate with the doses, just fine. And your body fat's in a reasonable place, just fine. Test and EQ is an alternative. Test and Nandrolone is my favorite for size, but Nandrolone doesn't always agree with me. Sometimes it causes gyno, makes me anxious. Other people have that issue. Some people get ED from it, from the prolactin buildup. Rather than taking shit like bromo and whatever to deal with that, just don't use Nandrolone. Use something else. It's not that big of a difference. Um, Remember, less drugs are always better. Avoid orals. I don't know what the fascination is that guys have with orals. Oh, I'm going to take some Anadrol. Oh, I'm going to take some D-ball. These drugs are garbage, and I promise you that most pros are not running that shit in the off season. They aren't. They just aren't. They make you sick. They curb your appetite. They impair your liver function. They fuck up your lipids. They cause stomach issues. You get indigestion. Um, you know, how productive do you think all that stuff is for building size long term? Not very, not very productive. If you feel sick, if your liver's not functioning at the highest level, if you have plaque buildup, your stomach's upset, you're not going to be able to get big. You're just not. Avoid harsh compounds like trin. Save that for contest prep. If you can't sleep, if you're anxious, if you have sexual dysfunction, lowered appetite, all these things that stuff like tren and mint and things like that do, how productive is that for getting big? You want to be able to sleep. You want to be nice and chill. If you're worried about not being able to get a boner, that's an issue. If your appetite's lowered, that's an issue. Stick with the stuff that allows you to eat, sleep, get big. I think sometimes people mistake side effects for effects. The shittier something makes you feel, the more they think it's working. That's not always the truth. Uh, think long term when you're building your cycles. Try to construct cycles that require as little estrogen and side effect management as possible. I've already kind of talked about this. If you have to take more drugs to justify taking the drugs that you're already taking, it's probably not a good choice. More drugs always equals more problems and more side effects in a less healthy body, and a less healthy body is not as going to grow as much. Um, so and bodybuilding is a game of years, not in months. You have to think in terms of years. Is this sustainable for 5 or 10 years? I mean, 10 years on average to turn pro. That's I think that's what Steve Weinberger said. It was close to 10 years that they average pro, trained diligently and probably use PEDs before they turn pro. Can you sustain what you're doing for 10 years? I would say most people, the answer is going to be no. So moderate use, low term, low side effects, long term thinking is what gets you big. My experience for first cycle, I would just recommend trying test only. Maybe Anavar only if you wanted to dip your toe in the pool, but I think test only is probably the smartest approach. Run a TRT dose, see how you respond. If you get a lot of estrogenic side effects, you'll know that you probably need to stay away from stuff that aromatize heavily. Um, if everything goes well in the first cycle, you know, try test in an anabolic for your next one. Maybe test in nandrolone. See how you respond. If you go out the gate using two compounds and you have side effects, you don't know which one's causing the issues, so you can't make adjustments. So start off with one, see how it goes, then add another compound, then see how it goes. Don't go adding a bunch of stuff. The more stuff you add, the more variables you have, the less you know what's going on, and you can't make smart adjustments moving forward. When you're starting out, you're just trying to figure out what works for you. That's probably the most important thing. What you respond to, what causes the least amount of side effects. That's what you're trying to establish when you first start. I've tried tests as high as 1.25 grams, 1,250 milligrams a week. All it did was make me feel sick. I felt like shit. Um, 500 to 1,000 seems to be the sweet spot for me. I'm around 270 right now. Um, you know, more than 1 gram, they call it the test flu, where you just feel like you run a mild fever, you feel sick, you can't train. If you can't train because you feel sick, then that's not productive either. So you're taking too much. I've also found that anything more than 750 milligrams for me requires serious estrogen management, especially as my body fat creeps higher. So when my body fat's high, I have to be very low with my doses of test and run anabolics. Or even better, just don't let your body fat get that high. I'll do another video on this, but cycling on and off seems counterproductive to me. Guys that, do 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off, you're going to lose just about everything you gain on the 8 weeks off. If you're scared, then just don't take them. That's just my opinion. You don't cycle on and off any other medicine. You don't cycle on and off your blood pressure medicine. You don't cycle on and off birth control. It just seems counterproductive to me. It's not going to give you long-term results. And if I would just say this, if you're that concerned, then just don't take them to begin with. The safest route is just not taking them. I will say once you start, it is a slippery slope. I give everybody that warning, and it's not because of some physiological reason that you'll not stop. People think that you can't recover your natural test levels. I was on for 5 years straight, came off, recovered just fine, had 2 kids afterwards, no issues. I'm not saying that some people can't be permanently shut down. I guess it probably gets worse as you get older, but I had no issues. And it's not to say you're not, but it's the slippery slope is the psychological need for it, addiction, I guess. Once you've trained enhanced, going back to training natural sucks. It's just the truth. You feel mortal, and a lot of times you don't realize you're on until you come off. That's when guys realize, oh, this is what it feels like to train natural. So I forewarn you, I would only go down this route if you're pushing to be a professional athlete, or maybe if you're over 40 and you're running TRT and HRT, that's a different ball game. That's kind of in the area that I'm in right now. Um, hormone replacement therapy with the doctor managing it, that's a different ball game. But I'm telling you, once you come on, it's like getting bit by the vampire. You're not coming off. So I just, unless you want to make that commitment, just stay away from it altogether. Um, for me personally, I get the best size results from tested nandrolone. One thing I will point out, if you do use nandrolone, I strongly advise using NPP because it's in and out of your system fast. I know people have this obsession with DECA. I know you don't need to take as frequent shots with DECA, but DECA stays in your system for a really fucking long time. If you start having prolactin issues with gyno and erectile dysfunction, you're looking at months to get that DECA cleared out of your system. That you could be dealing with these problems. And I don't think taking these other drugs to deal with the side effects of prolactin is smart either. So I would just say use NPP. If you start noticing side effects, come off. NPP will clear out quick. You know, you know, in days it starts. I think the half life on the propionate ester is something like 2 days. So it's going to be cleared out of your system in a couple weeks. You can be back to a normal base level, and you can bring the progestinic and prolactin effects and the prolactin back down to normal naturally without having to use other drugs. That's my 2 cents. I like fast esters in general, just except for maybe test, uh, so that way you can ratchet things up quickly and come off quickly in case you have issues. Anyway, thank you. That's all I have. Please like and subscribe, as I mentioned before. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section. If there are other videos you'd like me to make, please let me know. I'm happy to do so. And if you want to keep up with what's going on with me, you can follow me on Instagram at Paul K. Barnett. Have a great day.